Welcome to the PDP Situation Report. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. Coming to you this weekend from, well, clearly somewhere very posh. All right, let's get briefed. First up, China's military is in chaos. Xi Jinping has purged his own generals in a growing power struggle inside the People's Liberation Army. We'll be joined by Steve Yates, friend of the show and smart guy, for more on that. Later in the show, the U.S. steps up its operations at sea, striking two more vessels, this time in the Pacific, allegedly tied to drug trafficking. But questions are growing about the targets, the evidence, and what this mission is really aiming to achieve. Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillip gives us his insights. But first, today's PDB Situation Report spotlight. President Xi Jinping has launched his most sweeping military purges yet, ousting his second-in-command, General He Weidong, and several other top generals in what insiders describe as a full-blown power struggle inside the People's Liberation Army. Beijing calls it a crackdown on corruption, but analysts, well, they say it's really about loyalty and Xi's fear of losing control over his own military. The purge follows the mysterious disappearance of China's defense minister and last year's shakeup of its nuclear missile force, raising new questions about the stability of the world's largest army. So, what's really driving this? And what does it mean for China's future military ambitions? Joining me now is Steve Yates. He's a senior research fellow for China and national security policy at the Heritage Foundation and good friend of the show. Steve, thanks very much for coming on the show again.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be back.
Well, I'm impressed that you would say that. If you'd write a note and send it to the producers, I'd appreciate it very much. Let's start from the very, very, very top of this whole purge situation. What do you make of it?
Well, I have very, very good friends I've known for decades who watch this stuff pretty closely, and frankly, they're divided. And I lean more on the side that this is just Xi not really being completely comfortable in his own skin and just sort of trimming the herd as much as he feels necessary to stay in power. So some of my friends say that this is him exercising control because he's at risk of being deposed. I'm more of the mind that bad leaders stick around a lot longer than people estimate or want. Not because I wish it, because I don't wish it, but I think that this is more of the trimming of that herd so he keeps control and it likely consolidates his power for a bit.
So you're not putting a lot of weight or credibility into what his usual explanation is. Anytime she does this, he usually talks about corruption and graft, and I'm cleaning things up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if this is a giant mafia, and sort of the first point of entry in joining any mafia is committing a crime. And so everyone who's in the mafia has dirt on them, and the boss gets to choose when and how to use it against them. And that's, I think, essentially what's going on. I don't think there are any clean hands in the top levels of the People's Liberation Army or the Central Military Commission. But it's really Xi's kind of prerogative to pick when he's going to clean these folks out. The oddity this time is that because he's been a leader for so long, a lot of these people are his appointees. So when he was doing it in the early stages, it was seen as thinning the herd so that he could get his own people in. Now he's cleaning some of his own people out.
Okay. Tell us about the top guy here that's been kicked off the team, as it were, General He Weidong.
Yeah, well, you have a couple of positions that are really, really important, have to do with strategies and plans, and there's another position that has to do with especially looking at Taiwan contingencies. And so we've had changes in these positions, but this was supposed to be a really close confidant of Xi. So it does make you have to scratch your head about, well, what did he do and why this change now? But frankly, we just don't have sufficient visibility in to get a sense for what difference this will make, especially until you see how the new person actually does things. Is there any change other than the name, rank, and serial number of the person who swapped in?
Mm-hmm. Is it the case that this fellow, General He Weidong, has he been one of Xi's guys? Was he appointed by Xi?
Yeah. Yeah, but basically, I'm told he's been a loyalist for a very long time. He was sort of assumed to be very, very trusted by him. But I guess, he came up through a system that is going to taint you along the way. And for whatever reason, I don't know if she is getting paranoid or if he's feeling pressure to change the chess pieces. I just don't see the evidence yet that this change of chess pieces means that she is getting replaced. I have some good friends who say, nope, this is it. It's getting close. This is a weakness being shown in public.
Mhm.
But until this gathering in Beijing that's going on now is concluded, I don't think there's any basis to jump to that conclusion.
Okay. Tell us about the gathering you just referred to. You talking about the plenary commission?
Yeah. So
Okay.
the Communist Party, I mean, as you know, Mike, communists love to have good meetings, and everyone in the audience
Who
is
doesn't?
dutifully.
Hey, I love a good meeting, but I'm not a
Hey,
communist.
but
Yeah.
they do it with pizzazz in the sense that everybody is like in a little red notebook scribbling down every word that the dear leader says as if
Mm.
it's coming down onto tablets on Sinai and the posterity is ever going to read all these notes, but they've got to look to the main guy. Like, not only am I listening to you, but I'm writing this stuff down because this is my bedtime reading. This is what I'm going to have breakfast to. This is going straight into my veins. And they do it. And now I say it's pizzazz. That's really the wrong word because these guys look near dead while they're doing it. I mean, there's nothing, there's not a sound in the room. They barely move. They're just doing their thing. But they'll have an annual meeting where personnel decisions will be made, sort of core doctrine gets espoused from the podium. And in old times, whether we were watching the Soviets or the Chinese communists, we would look at, well, who's sitting next to who, and who's up, who's down. I think
Mm.
there's a less to read into that stuff these days. So now is there really any shift in strategy that's announced by Xi? And do these personnel changes actually change some of the rumors that go out about, say, timelines against Taiwan? Or do people think he's been be a little too aggressive in the South China Sea and the Philippines, and that blowback is actually not to China's advantage? Do they see the venture with Russia as having hurt China now that
Mm.
sanctions might be coming? Those are the kinds of things we'll be looking for tea leaves on.
Okay. Well, you're absolutely right. At the agency, um, we used to have teams of analysts who would spend days picking apart the seating chart,
Yep.
whether it was North Korea or China or even Russia, um, just to try to gather something, which was an indication that oftentimes it was very hard to get human intelligence that could tell you, who was in, who was out, who was being pushed out the door. So let me ask you this: with the plenary, with a meeting like this, is it completely top down? Meaning, when you talk about people who get voted in, or positions changing, or policies being confirmed or stressed, does that all come in from she? So everybody else is basically just scribbling in their red book, and they're serving very little purpose.
It's basically she and the people on the committee that he appointed. And over time, those are all people he has significant power and influence over. So on the Central Military Commission, there are other members of the commission. Technically, they would vote, and they're probably playing a role in setting whatever the agenda is. They might be able to sort of steer the aircraft carrier a degree or two, but like an aircraft carrier, it's not changing fast, and no one of them is going to be able to have enough weight to make significant change. So I think we're looking at orders of magnitude like that, where there might be some influence. But I think, make no mistake, under all circumstances, the top leader of the Communist Party of China is overwhelmingly in charge. And
Okay.
sometimes what they call the collective leadership, there can be divisions and pulls to the left, to the right. Deng Xiaoping famously presided over supposedly divided government on that. And when you look back in retrospect, there was a maniacal consistency to the outcomes, which makes me doubt that there was really all this tug of war. But and in real time, we felt like there was these reformers and hawks and all of that. Today, this
Yeah.
is all basically she, and it is basically all top down.
Yeah, I would. It's interesting what you said about Deng Xiaoping. I would have argued, or still actually would argue, that the two leaders in the past that have had the tightest grip have been Mao and Deng Xiaoping. and now you got Xi. But
Yep.
with Xi Jinping, I mean, if you set aside his reason or his narrative that I'm doing these changes, whether it was with the rocket force or his defense minister or now these generals that have been pushed out, that he's doing this because of a desire for cleaning out corruption, right? And which makes him sound like a good guy, corruption
Right.
fighter. If you set that aside, then this move, I mean, it's hard not to read into it that he feels threatened, right?
Yeah.
Which then would speak to what you were saying about some of the analysts, some of the people that you know who are talking about the potential for him to lose his grip on power.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's still there. I see a divide, and you're absolutely right. There are people who are arguing strenuously that this is how this evidence stacks up. The counter to it is that you can also stack up evidence that says she wants to have viable options to take decisive action against Taiwan in 2027. Not because he intends to invade or execute in 2027, but he wants to have those viable options by that point. Now, it could be that in nearing the end of 2025, he's looking at the options and he's saying, this isn't giving me what I asked for. And so he's cleaning house on these may have been people I appointed, they may have been loyal enough, but they're not giving me what I asked for. And so out with them and bring in the people that will give me the options that I need. It's also a plausible stack of evidence to say that even the PLA could be divided about is all of this worth it right now? They have a rapidly expanding military manufacturing complex, but none of this stuff has been tested in real combat. And even a lot of their sea vessels, they haven't put that many out to see whether all the welds are holding, whether they have double or single hull to be torpedo resistant. I mean, there's a lot that's untested in that. And the military itself knows that much better than the political leadership does. And so there could be people that are saying, whoa, yeah, we're all against America. We want to take Taiwan back too, but we think you're being reckless with the Philippines and you're provoking Japan. And now we got this Trump guy who says that they're going to revitalize the spirit of war and the Department of War. We think you've pushed too far. And so he could be meeting that resistance, but he's pruning those branches out. So the problem, just like in the old days, we know so little that very, very smart and engaged and interested people can build up all these narratives, and our leaders have to just sort of pick which is the safest bet and how do we hedge.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It all comes down to do you have sufficient credible human? Do you have good sources who can tell you these things? What's happening inside the tent? And China's always been a heavy lift, of course.
Absolutely.
Steve, if you would stay right there, we got a lot more to talk about, but we've got to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more from Steve Yates at the Heritage Foundation in just a moment. Stick around. Hey, Mike Baker here, PDB host and, of course, fashion icon. So I want to tell you about a great clothing company called True Classic. Now, the guys at True Classic started with a very simple mission: to bring premium, comfortable clothing to the masses. Because looking and feeling great, they believe, shouldn't come with a designer price tag. And clearly, people agree. People vote with their dollars. And True Classic has sold over 25 million shirts, get that, 25 million shirts, to more than 5 million customers. And in the process, racking up over 200,000 five-star reviews. This brand, True Classic, is all about helping guys show up every day with confidence and purpose. Their shirts fit where they should. They feel incredible, and they don't break the bank. You get that tailored look without sacrificing comfort or blowing your budget. Now, I've been wearing True Classic shirts for quite a while now, and you can feel the difference the moment you throw one on. They fit great. They look great. What's not to like? Come on. Forget overpriced designer brands. Skip the cheap throwaway stuff. True Classic is built for comfort, built to last, and built to give back. You can find them on Amazon or at Target, Costco, Sam's Club, or just head on over to trueclassic.com/PDB to try them out for yourself. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. Joining me once again is Senior Research Fellow for China and National Security Policy at the Heritage Foundation. You know him, you love him, can't live without him, right? I just made that saying up. It's Steve Yates. Steve, thanks very much for sticking around.
Thank you, Mike.
Uh, something you said during the previous segment, I wanted to pick that up. Very interesting. We're talking about Xi Jinping moving out these generals, 9 of them, in a fairly significant purge at the senior levels of his military and the People's Liberation Army. And I'm fascinated by the concept that maybe General He Dong and the others weren't fully on board with Xi's timeline for moving on Taiwan. And for one reason or another, who knows what that is. I know this is speculation, but I find that to be a very interesting thought.
Well, again, we don't get to know, but in looking at these changes, it's just among the logical possibilities that even in evil regimes, there occasionally is a burst of rationality where they go, "Oh crap! If this guy hits the go button, a lot of us could die, or these systems could fail, and our own people or our own military might kill us." And you sort of had sensed during the Cold War, along the lines of that Sting lyric, "We hope the Russians love their children too." You just wonder, even in these other regimes, every once in a while, someone is looking at this and they know because they've got access to it all. Whoa, this might not work the way we've been building it up, or they think that they've got a better idea and they've been overruled on the plan. And of course, it's a cardinal sin in a mafia or the CCP to try to offer a plan that's at odds with what the top leader seemingly has conducted a seance with Marx and Lenin and Mao and come up with.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, kudos to you for coming up with a Sting reference and citing Sting lyrics. That's the first time that's ever happened on the
I am
Situation
of
Report.
that age, so it's
Yeah,
seared
yeah.
into my mind.
I mean, I often cite Taylor Swift lines,
I
but
can't do that.
yeah, that's just me. I'm a little more hip, to the ways of the kids nowadays. Look, are you surprised? This is going to sound like an odd question, but it is a sign of his grip on power or his control that he can just wave his hand and 9 senior officers in the PLA are gone.
Ultimately, that's why I come down on this is an indication of him having overwhelming power and wielding overwhelming power. Even though you can sort of take the glass half full, glass half empty, well, he shouldn't have to remove that number of people if he was doing so great.
Mhm.
But because he can, and I will wager in a week or 2 or 4 weeks' time, no one in China is going to be questioning this. And so that's the icing on the cake that says this is a power move that he can do and get away with because he's in that position of ultimate power. And until there's some kind of real demonstration otherwise, I don't know how you nudge off of that being the dominant thesis.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to switch gears just slightly. I want to stay in China, but I want to talk about a very recent development related to China's purchase of Russian oil and gas. They've been the number one consumer and have been really, I would argue, the primary reason why Putin's been able to keep his war machine moving. But now it looks like they're backing off of those purchases. Talk to me about that. Where are we with this? Why is it happening?
Well, this is one of those things where I've always had the problem of the wish being the father of my thought. I have wanted these kinds of sanctions to be imposed on China from the get-go because seemed very obvious to me that China was more actively vested in the Russian invasion of Ukraine than was accepted wisdom for at least the first year and then most of the second year of the conflict. I think now almost everyone just takes it as a given that they have been involved, if not the whole time, much of the time. And the magnitude of this money transfer, it's that funny word fungibility, that this exchange gives them the wherewithal to sustain that war machine. And especially when the president hit India with the tariff hike as a penalty, it was really awkward about why India, who percentage-wise buys a lot less. And one of the rationales I was given is because they shouldn't buy any at all, and we should probably be able to get them to stop first. Well, maybe, but the magnitude with China is big. China has been sending propaganda back our way that don't even bother sanctioning us. We can survive this. We'll adapt. You're going to fail. All this kind of claptrap, which doesn't come as a shock for political warfare terms, but seemingly they might believe that this is coming now. I don't know if it's because the president is more visibly perturbed about Putin, the calling off of the meeting in Hungary, at least for a time, having Besant openly announce sweeping new penalties on Russian entities. Maybe this makes the Chinese say, well, shoot, if Xi Jinping goes to APEC and has a pull aside with Trump, he just might slap some of this on us. And so preemptively, their, I would say, air quotes, commercial entities seem to have at least dialed back. I don't know how long that will last or how strategic it will be, but it's the first indicator I've seen move in that direction for a while.
What do we know about the specifics of just how much they pull back and which entities and to what degree?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the same headline you have, and frankly, that was fresh news to me. So I don't know that there's any meaningful data right now. I would think in basically a few days' time, we'll see if there's a move in markets. And there's a few energy people that seem to watch things by the barrel. They probably know that answer. And I gotta go phone a friend to have them fill me in on what's
Well,
going on
okay,
in those
go ahead
markets.
and do that right now. I'll wait. I'll just sit here and you do that. I'll listen to the smooth
Yeah.
jazz downstairs. Yeah, I haven't seen any real specifics. I guess also I'm somewhat cynical, right? So
Yeah,
until we see some
which is
actual
the right
movement,
position.
yeah, yeah, you have to see the movement in the markets, and other actual evidence before you would believe that this is more than just kind of set dressing. So, but it is fascinating. It is interesting that they have stood up and took notice, and I think you're onto something when you talk about that upcoming meeting, potential upcoming meeting between Trump. Is that going to happen? Do you think the Trump and Xi Jinping meeting at the
I
summit?
tell you what, we get a mixed message every single day. It's on, it's off, it's a meeting, it's a pull aside. She might not go. All this stuff about the purge in the military leadership. People are
Mhm.
suggesting that she's at risk. He can't afford to leave the country. APEC leader meetings are not always represented by the top leader of each country. And so there's been so many variables, but from the White House and from the Chinese, there's been no confirmation yet that she is going, and there's no confirmation that a meeting is set.
That's
But
interesting.
there is one lesson from the past that I would apply to this oil markets issue, and that's what are we if we are the ones pressuring China and the pressure works, what have we asked them to do in response to that pressure? And if it is to get Putin back to the table, that reminds me of when we put the overwhelming sanctions on Banco Delta Asia to get the North Koreans to the negotiating table. And we got them to the table and we got more talk. We got a fake deal. Nothing changed. And so if this is a temporary use of this leverage, and then what it does is it gets the Chinese to compel Putin or his rep to get back to the table for more talks, and that's all it is, then that's a repeat of the sort of Diplo garbage that we went through in the past.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And frankly, I have no belief that Putin has any interest in doing anything other than just stringing things along and keeping the status quo. It is interesting that you mentioned it briefly. It is interesting that we've put additional sanctions now. I think on Lukoil and Rosneft, amongst other entities in Russia. But look, we've seen that over the years, the Russians and the Iranians, and so by that example, you have to assume the Chinese are very good at evading sanctions, finding
Yeah.
workarounds. So you always have to wonder, exactly how productive are they on that point. So, Steve Yates, thanks so much as always. Senior Research Fellow for China and National Security Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Safe travels, Steve, and thank you
Thanks
again.
very
We'll see you
much.
soon.
See you.
Take care, man. All right, coming up next, U.S. forces strike two more vessels, this time in the Pacific, expanding their maritime crackdown on drug smuggling. But questions are mounting about what's really behind the operation. Joshua Phillip of the Epoch Times will join us to provide insight. Stay right there. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take just a moment of your time to talk about sweat. Yeah, I guess you probably didn't see that coming. Now, you likely have noticed that fall is here. Some people call it autumn. Fancy people call it autumn. And staying fresh, let me tell you, through backyard football games, pumpkin carving, apple picking, and yard work. Don't forget the yard work. Well, it's tough. That's where Mando deodorant comes in. See, I told you I'd talk about sweat. I've been using their sweat control solid stick, and it's a game changer. It delivers all day odor and sweat control with zero clothing marks. You know what I'm talking about. It prevents odor before it starts using what they call mandelic acid. It's clinical strength protection that reduces sweat by 92%. Get out of here, 92% after just 12 hours. So give it a go. You'll feel dry, confident, and energized without reapplying. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. Solid stick, cream tube, and 2 free products like their mini body wash and deodorant wipes. Plus, you get free shipping. As a special offer for our PDB listeners, new customers get 20% off site-wide with code PDB at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com, code PDB for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. And after you make your purchase, Mando will ask you, hey, where'd you hear about us? Do me a favor. Tell them the PDB sent you. Again, that's shopmando.com, code PDB for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. This week, the administration confirmed that U.S. forces struck 2 vessels in the Pacific Ocean, the latest in a growing campaign against seaborne drug smuggling. It marks 9 strikes that we know of in total since the operation began. Weeks into this campaign, one crucial detail remains conspicuously absent. No one has confirmed what narcotics these boats were allegedly carrying. Were they loaded with coke from Colombia's cartels or fentanyl components from Chinese suppliers routed through Venezuela? What is clear is that this new narco boat initiative marks a major escalation in America's use of military force in the Western Hemisphere. And here to help us break it all down is senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, Joshua Phillip. Joshua, thank you very much for taking the time to join us here on the Situation Report.
Hey, real pleasure being here. Thank you.
Where do you stand on this anti-piracy thing we got going on out there in the 7 seas, blowing vessels out of the water? What do you think about it?
Well, I think we're being told that it's just innocent fishermen. Maybe they're fishing for fentanyl. But no, I'm all for it. I think with drug cartels, honestly, they should be labeled as terrorists. These are paramilitary organizations. In terms of influence, subversion, bribery, blackmail, murder, assassinations, the way they control entire governments, it's horrible. And allowing them to go as long as we have is basically let them take over entire countries within Latin America, to the point where you have the heads of entire states, Venezuela, now Colombia, being labeled as effectively like leaders of the drug cartels. So I don't know if anything short of this could solve it.
Yeah. I will say, from my perspective, I'm old enough. I actually spent time during the 80s engaged in the drug wars. I'm happy now to see that we're actually treating it like a war. Yeah. And because in the past, we did a lot of interdiction, but you never really changed things, right? You could take a ton of gear off the street, right, or out of a warehouse somewhere, and it wouldn't change that street price at all, right? Because there was just so much of it, so much warehouse. And you just felt like all you were doing was just kind of putting lipstick on a pig every time you had a successful operation. So I am kind of happy to see this. I will say, well, let me phrase this differently. I don't need to tell you what I think. The viewers, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear what you think. What do you think about the level of information that is being provided by the White House during the course of this campaign?
Well, from my perspective right now is the White House wants to have less information public, is what I think they want. And let me explain a couple parts on that. They just held this big press conference. Trump's coming out alongside Hegseth, and they're basically saying they're going to expand the war against the cartels. When Trump was running for office, he made it very clear he was going to use basically the whole military, the intelligence system, to wage war on the cartels. He said he was going to do it. And he said that if any government in Latin America tries to block him from doing it, that he would expose their connections to the cartels because most of them are implicated. That's just how it goes. The recent changes they made at the Pentagon, making it so that journalists can't just wander around. They have to show their press badges so they can't, sneak around, like listening to conversations. And also they can't publish like, illegal leaks. I believe that's also tied in with this. I think they don't want to have it like every time they plan on doing something, the media publishes it and then blows a lid on it and the whole operation gets thrown under the bus. I think they don't want that anymore. And if you were to ask me, a lot of what's happening in Latin America, it's actually bigger than just a few little boats and a few little cartels, running their operations. The cartels are tied in with broader things. They're tied in with terrorism. Post 9/11, that was the narrative. Remember the commercials? If you smoke marijuana, you're supporting terrorism. It's actually kind of true, like a little bit more like opium and stuff like that. But there are narco terrorist organizations in Latin America. Shining Path, one of the big ones. You have very active Hezbollah networks all throughout Latin America. Hezbollah has been working, training the cartels on drones, on roadside bombs, on tunnel building, including even in Mexico, actually. It's very intertwined with that. Then you have a lot of nation state actors, Iran, Russia, huge influence, but the Chinese Communist Party really established most of the networks. Most of the drug trade in Latin America, the big stuff, that was started under Mao Zedong. He called it people's opium, right? People's heroin. And he modeled it after the Opium Wars. He wanted to have a way to make money for the entire, international revolution. They trained a lot of the cartels. That's why they're narco terrorists. They're actually Maoist. A lot of them are Maoist trained. I'm not talking just Mexico. I'm talking about all throughout like Central and South America. They're Maoist trained. And the CCP went through mainly through Cuba, and Cuban intelligence established most of those, subversive movements. These are very much tied into political movements. You have entire political parties compromised by the cartels. They've made it their way into like the political systems where in some areas, like in Mexico, they're governed by the cartels. You have some areas where the cartel is the government. And they've infiltrated the culture, the economy, and a lot of people don't want to get rid of it because it's become part of the lifeblood of the region. And they make their money by poisoning and killing Americans and terrorizing populations.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I mean, I think it is. Look, we know that Al Qaeda, as an example, had liaison with a handful of the Mexican cartels back during sort of the Al Qaeda heyday. Because they knew that the cartels knew how to move people and weapons and gear across the border. So that made perfect sense, right? They're just being efficient. I guess the question about the White House and the level of transparency in terms of their targeting, my concern isn't so much that I have a problem with targeting narco terrorists. I don't. Clearly, given my background. But I do think that they could arm themselves better against pushback from the left in particular by providing better information, more transparency to the degree that they can, right? Obviously, you're gonna jeopardize sources and methods, but providing a bit more transparency about the targeting process, about how they're selecting these targets and what these targets are, who they're connected to, what they're carrying. I think what that does is it negates some of this pushback that is happening now, particularly from the left, which is always looking for something to push back against the Trump administration with.
I agree with you, actually. I think it would actually be in their interest to go further in one direction or the other direction. They either need to lean into transparency or lean into secrecy.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
They either make it more secret and quit posting videos of them blowing up boats, or they go more transparency, like you were saying, where they detail these were the guys driving the boats. This is what they were carrying. This is what intelligence says. This is how we know. Because otherwise they're going to deal with this. Like, you remember when they were blowing up like the Houthis? And they were posting videos of it, and the media was like, Trump blows up tribal meeting.
Yeah, that's Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it reminds you of that, or when, like, they started operations against the Somali pirates, and they were like Somali fishermen being targeted.
Yeah. Well, and look, and I
Innocent
mean,
fishermen.
Gustavo Petro of Colombia is he's kind of leading that charge from the international side, right? And he's pushing
Yeah,
out there, oh my God, this is murder. These people were just out there trying to earn a living on a fishing boat, and how dare you? And you know what? Without sufficient information, I mean, it's one thing, President Trump pushed back and said, well, you're a lunatic, but that's not going to satisfy, those that are saying, okay, well, how about give us some information that negates what somebody like Petro is saying, or the New York Times, or whomever, because the average American's not going to have any heartburn
yeah.
over targeting narco terrorists. It's just not going to happen. But I think they need to feel that it's a little bit like, okay, careful now, Joshua. I might jump up on a soapbox here, but
Yeah.
it's a bit like the issue of illegal immigrants and who do you go after, right? When Tom Homan talked about we're going after the worst of the worst, well, by God, everybody's like, yeah, sure, pick up criminals off the street and deport them. Why not? But then what happens is you get these scenes at a Home Depot, right? Or so, and that's when people who are sort of in the middle, and there are a lot of them, I would argue, but they're just very quiet. They get a little squirrely, right? And they say, well, I'm not sure, that doesn't sound like what we talked about, right? And and so I think with this targeting campaign, um, I think that it's there's a little bit of that there, right? Provide a little bit more information,
Mm.
and you push back, and the average person who's not going to have a problem with it will go, "Oh yeah, I get it. That makes perfect sense."
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, it would be very much in their interest to do that. On the point of deportations, I think
Mm,
they have turned the narrative around quite a bit, because every day it's like, I follow the Homeland Security account and the
mm,
ICE account on X. Every day it's like they show the mug shots and they say what the guy's guilty of. Child predator, domestic abuser, repeat drunk driver. Like, they list these things. When they did that raid just recently in New York, where they rounded up a bunch of these like African guys selling counterfeit bags and stuff.
mm.
I mean, I've seen those guys for years. I'm in New
Right,
York right now. I've seen
right.
them for years. Nothing ever happens to them. Seeing them round those guys up and then posting, not all of them. They arrested something like 20 and 40 of them.
Mm,
They
yeah,
only they only detailed 9, but those 9 make the whole thing look pretty serious. You're talking about guys who were like guilty of assault, repeated criminals, and
right.
and they tell you that, and that's part of the information campaign.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that's, I guess that's what I'm talking about is give the average American a little bit, trust them, give them a little bit more information, and they'll make up their minds, and usually they'll figure it out, right? But oftentimes it seems like the Trump administration just lets the left drive the narrative because they're not explaining themselves, or their messaging isn't quite where
Yeah.
it needs to be. Listen, as I climb off my soapbox now, I want you to, if you could, stick around. We got to take a quick break, okay? And then we'll be back with more from Joshua Phillip at the Epoch Times. Stick around. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, if you own a handgun for self-defense like I do, okay, maybe more than one, then your storage options likely fall into two relatively frustrating categories, right? Locked away and out of reach, or unsecured and vulnerable. And frankly, neither is a good option. So let me tell you about Stopbox. It's a terrific company that has built a better mousetrap. Stopbox USA solved the weapon storage problem with the Stopbox Pro. It's a mechanical keyless safe that offers fast, secure access without batteries or keys. Its push button locking system ensures reliability when every second counts. It drastically reduces response time while keeping your firearm protected. With Stopbox USA, you no longer have to choose between security and readiness. The Stopbox Pro delivers both efficiently, reliably, and without compromise. And for a limited time, our listeners at the PDB get 15% off at Stopbox when you use code BAKER, that's BAKER, at checkout. Head over to stopboxusa.com and use code BAKER for 15% off your entire order. And after your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Do me a favor and tell them the PDB sent you. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. Joining me once again is senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, Joshua Phillip. Joshua, thanks very much for sticking around. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, real pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, man. Staying with the drug campaign, the anti-drug campaign that the Trump administration is currently engaged in. Talk to me, if you could, a little bit about the linkages, the connections between Venezuela and China.
Oh, yeah. So, in my opinion, China is the real issue around Venezuela. And a lot of this goes back to 2018. So let's go back 2018, what happened, right? Trump was still president, first term in office still, Biden had not come in yet. The Venezuelan elections happen, it's chaos. Maduro is accused of rigging the election. Trump calls him out for it. There's protests in the streets of Venezuela. 2019, you have Guaido come in as like the opposition leader. The United States backs Guaido, Juan Guaido, and Venezuela basically accuses Trump of trying to overthrow their government. Trump says, "No, you're the illegitimate government." Trump is pushed out of, well, actually, before that, let me get into it. Then something interesting happens. If you remember, Trump was actually talking about possibly intervening in Venezuela. There was talks of a U.S. government intervention in Venezuela. Then what happened? Russia and China deployed security forces to Venezuela. The narrative in the media at the time was that they're protecting Chinese and Russian investment. You're talking 60, $80 billion of Chinese investment through the Belt and Road Initiative. Basically, the CCP bailed them out. And Venezuela, in many regards, because of, again, debt traps through the Belt and Road Initiative, infrastructure deals, mineral deals, resource deals, the CCP owns Venezuela. They were protecting their assets, right? They intervened there, and then Russia sent a message telling the United States during Trump's first term, if America intervenes, there will be bloodshed. And, you take it as you will, whether they were threatening us or not, but it worked because Trump actually backed off. The whole story about Venezuela in the U.S. basically died. Then Trump, of course, went into 2019 and the whole leading up to the election, I think he was kind of busy with that.
Yeah.
Biden comes in and actually maintains Trump's narrative on Venezuela. So, the Biden administration, they actually maintained that. They said Maduro was the illegitimate leader. The opposition leader was the official leader. The Biden administration actually designated Maduro as the leader of the cartel of the Suns, said that basically, again, it was a criminal cartel running the entire government. Same position as Trump, which is really interesting on that front. And then, of course, something else big happened, again, more so during the Trump time, but came in later. Just north of Venezuela in Guyana, you had one of the largest oil reserves in the entire world get discovered. Yeah. And everybody wants it. China wants it. The U.S. wants it. Everybody wants it. ExxonMobil is currently involved there. America has a good stake there. Then what happens just a few months back, Maduro says he's going to work with Brazil and Lula, and they're going to take it. And Marco Rubio, again, Secretary of State, goes down there. Actually, just a few months ago, even threatened Venezuela, saying, "Look, you intervene, you threaten America's, you threaten ExxonMobil because we're active there, then you're going to regret it." And that's kind of where things are at. And so, in my view, this is not just about drugs. It's about the Chinese footprint in Latin America. It's about oil. You could say in some regards, this is actually an oil war. It also ties into the Chinese Communist Party strategy with Brazil and with Venezuela. So one of Xi Jinping, the head of the CCP's main advisors, his name's Qin Can Rong. And Qin Can Rong several years back had a proposal. He said that if China wants to invade Taiwan, if they want to start a war, they need to basically distract America. He said, basically the U.S. military is designed to fight two wars. We have the Eastern Front and the Western Front, right? He said if they're going to win America, they need to get America dragged into at least 4 wars. They wanted a war with Russia. This was before Russia-Ukraine. This was before that happened. They wanted a war with terrorism. Think, Israel, Hamas, think Iran. This was before any of that happened. And they also wanted a war in Latin America. This was actually when they came up with this plan, it was during Lula's original term in office, before Bolsonaro came in Brazil. They wanted America to go to war with Brazil. As crazy as that sounds, this is public reporting in China. And what do we see now? Well, we have a war with Russia. We have a war in the Middle East, although Iran is maybe disabled. We don't know how much so.
Right.
And we do see a war getting stirred now with Brazil and with Venezuela. And of course, China's threatening Taiwan. So, is this the plan? I don't know, but this is what they were talking about.
Well, your point is excellent, which is, look, these things are always more complicated than they appear to be, or
Mhm.
than they're explained, right? Because maybe the news outlet only has a 3-minute segment to tell you about what's happening, right? Or people just lose interest. But these stories are always more complex, and nothing happens in a bubble. So I like the fact that you're tying these things together, because it's true. The world is incredibly interconnected. And look, China spent a great deal of time, well, particularly while we were distracted with the global war on terror, um, digging around Latin America in particular, right, and Africa, but in Latin America, doing what we now realize, which is locking up mineral resources.
Yeah. Well,
And
it goes further than this too,
yeah,
actually. Yeah, it goes further than this. So the Chinese, people say, well, what does Russia care? What does Latin America care about America?
mhm,
So in the eyes of these countries, the problem of America is sanctions. America basically disables their economy. We hit Russia with sanctions, it destroys their economy. We hit North Korea with sanctions, it makes them the hermit country. We hit Venezuela with sanctions, and China has to run these black ships where they turn the radar off and go and trade with them, right?
mhm,
We basically isolate countries when they violate standards on the international order. The international order is the Pax Americana. Basically, the entire system of what Russia would call the liberal democratic world order. An idea of what government is. The government is instituted basically to protect what we regard as God-given rights.
mhm.
The alternate world order, the China model, basically says do whatever the heck you want. Genocide, murder, crime, we don't care as long as you trade with us. Do as thou wilt, don't question us, we won't question you. And that's the CCP's world order. Now, they have a plan to take over America, but it's not like, invading our streets. They might do that eventually, right? They have what's called the multipolar world order. And what they want to do is they want to make America not the world leader, right? Top of the Pax Americana, what they call the unipolar world order, and instead make us just one seat at the global system of governance.
Right.
So you'd have Russia controlling, the former Eurasian, what they call the Eurasian Empire, right? They want to have basically the former Soviet bloc, and then controlling Western Europe through like oil and energy sales. China wants to control most of East Asia. They want to have the U.S. in its own little box, Canada in its own little box, Latin America in its own box, Middle Eastern powers, and then of course, like an African power. The China model would be the main model for this. And what happens? America loses its ability to sanction, and so that's what they want. It's a Maoist strategy.
It's
So
it's
Mao
a little bit
Zedong.
part of. I'm sorry for interrupting, Joshua, but
No
it's
worries.
it's it's a
Yeah.
it's a bit of a reason why they've been pushing on this global South
Yep.
concept,
It's
right?
exactly what it is.
Yeah,
Exactly what it is.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's that is absolutely correct. Before I forget, because you know what, if I don't write it on a post-it note and stick it to my forehead these days, I
Yeah.
might forget. But you mentioned international order. It's interesting because that's one of the things that Gustavo Petro is saying. Trump administration is neglecting international order. They're violating international order by by attacking narco trafficking boats. I mean, he's kind of hitched his horse to a strange wagon.
It is, and so so this ties into a Maoist strategy. Mao Zedong, when he was fighting the civil war in China, with the CCP, they knew they couldn't take the cities. They knew they couldn't just fight the cities, so they came up with a strategy called surround the city with the countryside. So rather than attack the city, you isolate the city. Same thing with America. They can't defeat America. What do? You defeat it by taking the countryside. You isolate it from its trade partners. You isolate it from Latin America. You isolate it from other people, and you divide it like that, right? If you can take away the people of a king, the king is not the king of anybody, right? You don't have to fight the king. You just destroy his sovereignty, basically. Same thing with America. And so that's what they want to do. They want to destroy the Pax Americana by going around the countryside, as they call it. And so for decades now, the Chinese Communist Party has been doing that. They've been very active, especially in Africa, very active in most of Asia, very active in the Middle East, and very active in Latin America. Well, America has really turned a blind eye to it. And a lot of this was run through what's called the Foro ao Sao Paulo, the Forum of Sao Paulo, which was Lula in Brazil working with Castro in Cuba. And they established kind of a system. We think like the World Economic Forum, think of like that on the government level through all of Latin America. CCP is involved with it, Iran's involved with it. And they were the guys behind the pink revolution, like the whole pink wave, right? The communist revolution that basically swept most of Latin America. They work again also with Shining Path. They used to be part of it. One of the narratives they've had with drugs is basically, let's solve the drug problem by basically legalizing it. We won't go after them. And then everybody's happy and we all make money. And so they normalize these things. Part of this, again, Foro ao Sao Paulo model that really has worked as a CCP model of transforming these countries.
Yeah, there's a lot here to unpack, Joshua, but I want to be mindful of time. I got a lot more questions for you. So I'm hoping when we call you again that you'll pick up the phone and say, sure, yeah, I'll get back on the situation report because we do have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, no problem.
That would be great. Listen, thank you very much again. Joshua Phillip, senior investigative reporter at the Epoch Times. Great seeing you, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully. Cool, man. Thanks. Well, that's all the time that we have for the PDB Situation Report for this weekend. There is a lot there to talk about. If you have any questions or comments or humorous anecdotes, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. You know what we do. Once a month, select team of PDB executives, they gather around our incredibly expensive mahogany conference table in our, somewhat posh conference room. And they choose the best comments and questions. And then we smash them all together into a monthly episode that we call Ask Me Anything. So keep the cards and letters coming. To listen to the podcast of this show ad-free, it's simple. Become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker. Until next time, you know the drill. Stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.